history nerds and historians. My name is Krystina, and this is Effed Up Cryptozoology. This is where we talk about cryptids that are super fucked up because it's Cryptmas. So, as I was going through and researching some of these cryptids, I found that there were some that I just didn't have much to write about because the stories aren't too long, at least how I was writing them. And I really don't want to give you episodes that are less than 5 minutes. They just don't sit right with me. And I could have just made it a TikTok at that point rather than going through the whole effort of recording and editing and uploading for something that won't even get you through a stoplight. So today we're going to talk about two shorter stories, the Chupacabra and the Dover Demon. One of them is probably one of the creepier ones in my opinion, and the other is rather close to home for me because who needs sleep at the end of the day? Not me, who is an insomniac and often gets 3 hours of sleep at night. What's also creepy though and close to home are my bills. Please consider joining my Patreon. The link is in the description. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and practice your oh good god, what the fuck faces. So we're going to start with the Chupacabra, which is one of kind of the newer cryptids. It's actually younger than me, but to be fair, everything is younger than me because I'm actually a 6,000-year-old witch. You think that I research these things that I talk about? Who has the time and who has such little to do with their life that they would spend hours upon hours researching historical things that nobody even thinks about and cryptids and mythology and stuff like who in their right mind would spend all of their time, all of their spare free time, instead of, binging the newest TV show and hanging out with friends and having a social life. Who would have the time for these things? No, darlings, I was there, and I'm just telling you my memories because I have a very good memory on top of being there, and as a 6,000-year-old witch, I just emerge every few hundred years to cause chaos before I then just retreat back into the ether and remain. Okay, whatever that was. So in March of 1995, in Morovis and Orocovis, Puerto Rico, livestock like goats and chickens were found dead. But not only were they dead, they were seemingly drained of all of their blood. So this continues over the next few months, and people who lived there kept finding them. In 1995, there were over 1,000 animals that were reported to have died this way. In September, someone finally saw what they believed was doing this, and they described it as a kangaroo gargoyle alien thing. It was about 4 feet tall and hairy. It had a big round head with lidless eyes and sharp fangs in a lipless mouth. It had claws and webbed arms and muscular legs with pointy little spikes down its back. Local media began calling this creature the Chupacabra, which seems fitting, but it actually means goat sucker. It started to get real notice a year after that first sighting in March of 1996 when there was a segment on the really famous talk show Krystina, not me. No, not me. Other Krystina, spelled completely differently. So Krystina was described in one source as the Puerto Rican version of Oprah. And I could never be called that. So after this segment, apparently the Chupacabra teleported because it started to be seen in Spanish-speaking communities in the United States, with the first being in Miami and then later in Texas and Arizona, and eventually even making its way out of the United States into Mexico. And since then, there have been about 2,000 reports in the last 18 or so years. Some people have noted that this is one of the first examples of folklore in the modern age that is spread through media and the new invention of the internet. I am a 90s kid, so I remember growing up with very minimal internet, and I remember, going to websites and doing all of those things sort of in the frontier of the internet in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I just, to think that this is like one of like the first things that were sort of circulated around the internet, even before like creepypastas and all of that, you know, because like creepypastas like Slender Man and Jeff the Killer and all of that, like that almost becomes like internet folklore in a way with how it circulated and how the stories spread. So it's really interesting to hear that it didn't start with like Reddit and creepypasta and stuff like that. It started with the Chupacabra, which actually had like legitimate reports throughout at least some of the area, at least at the beginning. So multiple websites in the late 90s and early 2000s began sprouting up about the Chupacabra, including one from Princeton University, which is probably the first website about it, and it's still up today, and boy, does it still look like the first website about it. I found it and was just like smacked with the like 90s internet nostalgia. Like I could hear like connecting to the internet in the background, and I just wanted to like immediately log into an AIM chat room and play some Slingo. And I'm gonna like totally break the fourth wall for a second and say like I actually found a Slingo app after doing that. Like I paused writing my script and like found a Slingo app and downloaded it and doom played it for like 2 hours. And it was great. I have no regrets. Anyway, I opened my laptop back up and the site was still up, and it's, I'm going to say it's probably like the best website I've ever seen in my life. So Scott Corrales, who was a cryptozoologist, looked into all of the reports and found that there were some reports all the way back from the 1970s and some stories from indigenous folklore from the Taino people who called the similar creature Maboya. So Maboya is said to be like a nocturnal deity who was supposed to destroy crops and seduce women. It said that they could send hurricanes, and they were seen as like a great sky serpent. So I don't really think that that's what it is. Some of these sources that I find are often like really kind of all over the place. And they'll like try to attribute things to like indigenous culture, but then when you actually go and like research what the indigenous culture says, you'll find that that's like not at all what that is, and not at all described even similarly to how it is. But apparently some people think it's this ancient Maboya from the Taino mythology. So there's a lot of theories about what the Chupacabra might be. Some people speculate that it has its origins in mermaid folklore and stories with how its appearance, especially with like the webbed arms. Some say it's like a half beast, half vampire. Some people say that it isn't from this world at all and it's actually an alien. My favorite quote on that comes from the Princeton website that says, quote, "I, for one, think that the truth may lie in the UFO area, my theory being that the Chupacabra is actually the pet panther, which hops like a kangaroo of some irresponsible aliens who let it wander around like obnoxious relatives who let their children rampage through the house." I will say that in Hood County, Texas in 2010, animal control killed what they said was a chupacabra. An autopsy was done by Texas A&M University, and the scientists determined that it was actually a coyote-dog hybrid with extreme mange and parasites. So that one might be kind of explained, but what isn't explained is the second one we're going to talk about, the Dover Demon. It was a dark and stormy night in Dover, Massachusetts. Actually, I don't think it was dark and stormy, but that does set the ambiance, does it? Anyway, April 21st, 1977, where it may have been dark and stormy, but probably not, in Dover, Massachusetts, which is about an hour south from Salem, Massachusetts, which is where I live, for any of you who don't know. 3 teenagers were driving down Farm Street when they saw a weird creature running along the top of the stone fence outside of a random empty field. The driver, named William Bartlett, said that it was 3 to 4 feet tall and bright peach with a texture like wet sandpaper. He said it was like a baby's body with long arms and long fingers and long legs and a giant watermelon head that was literally half of its length. It had no mouth, no nose, no ears, but giant orange glowing eyes. He said that no one else in the car saw it, but he was convinced. He also admitted he had smoked some pot earlier that night, but was convinced it had nothing to do with it. A couple hours later that same night, John Baxter, another teenager, was walking home along Miller Hill Road when he encountered this creature that ran off. It jumped onto a rock to get into a tree, but before it climbed up, it had a stare down with John, where he noticed that its toes were long and its eyes were glowing. He ran home and drew a picture. The next night, 2 more teenagers, Abby Brabham and Will Tainter, were driving around when they saw a creature in the same area on Springdale Avenue. Abby was the main one who saw it and said it looked like kind of like a tan, hairless monkey with an oblong head and green glowing eyes. So you have 3 encounters within like a 24-hour period, which was very weird and very suspicious. And then it was never seen again. Poof, vanished, spooky. One of those drawings was taped onto the wall of the Dover Country Store, and about a week after these sightings, Loren Coleman, who I think I've mentioned a couple times, who's like a cryptid expert, he walked into the Dover Country Store and saw it and began looking into it, and actually brought UFO experts from the area, Joseph Nyman, Ed Fogg, and Walter Webb. And they really did their due diligence. They re-interviewed everybody and got character witnesses about the witnesses to make sure that they were reliable. They talked to police. They talked to the press. They reenacted everything. They circulated the drawing to see if anyone else also saw what Coleman called the Dover Demon, and they came up empty. They came to the determination that it wasn't a hoax, and that's pretty much where it still stands today, almost 50 years later. Most people think that it was an alien of some kind, but not associated with alleged UFO activity in 1977. And that's where we're going to have to leave it today, because that's all she wrote on the matter. And by she, I mean me, because that's all I could find on the matter. So thank you so much for listening today. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing or leaving a review or joining my Patreon. And remember, friends, history may be watching you, so don't fuck it up. And be careful of the ones. Bye!